Hey everybody, thank you for joining. I see a couple of you guys in the house already. Just saying hi to everybody. I hope everybody had a good weekend, good 4th of July, and enjoyed your families and friends and all that good stuff. Tonight what I wanted to do is dig into something that came up in a Q&A session last week, which was, and shout out to Jeremy who asked this question. He plays in a band called Free, and they're getting ready to do a gig, or actually I think they already did the gig this past Saturday, and they were going to play tube, and tube can get really vampy, the clav solos going on, and then he was planning on, Jeremy plays guitar, he was planning on doing some jamming during that, but he found himself maybe kind of running out of ideas, or basically the question was, how can you take a vamp and keep yourself occupied or keep yourself interested and keep it interesting for yourself. Basically, vamps are cool because they on one hand are relatively simple in that they're not changing chords a lot, but that actually can open up some challenges, because if the chords aren't changing, that puts a little more, I don't want to say pressure on us, but kind of, it puts a little more pressure on us to produce some movement and something interesting. So the question is, how do we keep things interesting when there isn't a lot of movement? It's a different situation than if we were playing over like Sample in a Jar or AC/DC Bag, one of these tunes where you really have to play to the changes. That has a different kind of challenge where it's harder to keep up, maybe because the changes are going by. But on the other hand, the changes kind of give you a blueprint of what to do. But if we don't have that blueprint, then what are we left with? So tonight I want to share kind of a checklist that I would go over. And basically what this is all about is how to set up what I would call restricted practice. And the idea behind restricted practice is that you give yourself really you give yourself parameters you have to stay within. And you say, okay, I'm going to, in this jam, work on my Dorian, stuff, or throwing in arpeggios. You have a focus so that you don't feel like you're meandering or lost or not sure what to do. So that is kind of the premise of this whole thing. I didn't have a tube jam ready to go. I did have a sand jam track that I made. I'm going to reference that. And while I'm at it, I was reviewing last week's stream, and I was playing to a track inside of my recording software. But I didn't realize that when I played to that on the stream with you guys, it delays what I'm playing. And so, when I reviewed it, it came out sounding horrible because everything was delayed. So I'm going to try some different stuff tonight playing along so I can give you tangible, real world, stuff you can work on. But I apologize for last week. I had no idea it was coming out all out of whack. So if it's sounding super weird, guys, let me know. Let me know if it's like delayed or something seems strange. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of go through the checklist. I wrote out a worksheet for you guys, like a quick guide. There's a download in the description of the video. So if you want to grab that, I'm going to reference the exact one, so you'll see it here tonight. But if you want to print it out or whatever, there's a link there. And we'll go one by one, and really every single thing on this checklist could be greatly expanded on. So I'm going to try to hit as much as I can tonight. I can't give, well, first of all, I don't have all the answers, but I can't give all the answers for everything because everything's moving and everything's fluid. So like I said, the jam we're going to be referencing for this is going to be sand, but really you could apply this kind of concept to anything you do. Just before we jump in and get ready, if you're out there and haven't subscribed, please do that. I really appreciate it. I know you guys hear that all the time on YouTube, but it really does help spread the word. Hit like if you haven't already. I really would appreciate it. If you want to support the channel and the work that I'm doing, consider joining the course, or there are some other things you can do, but I really appreciate you guys. But with all that out of the way, let's get into it here. So I'm going to just share the screen, or the PDF here. And we'll just go through it little by little. And, as always, I love hearing from you guys as we go. So if anything needs clarifying, or, if you have anything to add, it's not always a question you might have, but you might have a cool tip for other people. So let's let this be kind of a communal thing and dive in if you're up for it. Okay, so basically, this is like a little checklist you can go through for your own practice, or even in a real world jam scenario. It's a little harder in that scenario because it's hard to kind of juggle your thoughts. But the more that you can kind of war game this stuff in your own practice, the better off you'll be. So number one, and let's just go through all of these. I'll just name them all, and then I'm going to explain, and then I'm going to show you how you can expand on it even more. So the first thing that I would ask myself is, what key, or, plural, what keys am I drawing from here? I should have also put time signature, but just include that, what key, what time signature, those sorts of things that give us foundational information about just kind of where we're at and what we can do. Let's see here. The next thing that kind of comes is, from the answer to that first question is, okay, so I've got the key that I'm playing in, and we'll apply this to sand in a little bit. But then, ask yourself, okay, now that I know the key or keys, what chords are available to use? And what I mean by that is not only, things that you can use in terms of, rhythm stuff, but you can do arpeggios, you can use things. I'll show in a little bit how I use some triad forms to build some motifs, stuff like that. So just basically taking stock of the key, the time signature, and the chords that go along with those first couple things. Obviously connected to that is also going to be about, okay, what scales and what modes are available. Because even if we say we're in such and such a key, so for example, in a bit, we'll say we're in the key of G major for the sand kind of scenario. Well, that is important info, but it doesn't really necessarily tell us everything we need to know about the scales or modes we can use, because it turns out, it's A Dorian, and so therefore things like the pentatonic scale will come in handy, the Dorian mode, and there are other sneaky things we can work into this where it's not just the first obvious answer. So then what I would do is, the next question is, okay, so I've got the key, I've got the time signature, I've got an idea of some scales I can use, some modes. Okay, now how can I use these elements that I've got to create a motif? Because really, like when you release, let's use Trey as an example. If you listen to Trey, almost all the time, he's starting out with a little simple, seed of an idea, this little theme, this little motif, and he just keeps working it and tweaking it. And from there, you can get so much out of your jams. You can get so much inspiration, and in a second I'll show you how you can kind of build off of that. And then, tying into number 5, I would say, okay, once you figure out some kind of motif, how many different ways can you play that same thing? And what I mean by that is not changing the notes or anything like that, but I mean literally the exact same thing. And I would even challenge you to try to, find all the different ways within one register, one octave, before moving on and trying it in a different octave. But just really challenging yourself, how many different ways can I play the same thing? Again, I'm going to dive into each one of these items on the list in detail. And then finally, number 6, how many different ways can I embellish the motif? So I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I want to pop back into view, and I see we got about 10 people hanging out. Thank you guys so much. So happy to see you guys. Let me know if you guys were at the concerts this weekend and how it was. So what I wanted to say, especially about that last thing, where it's about like how many different ways can I embellish on this motif? I think from what I've seen, just having worked with a lot of people, and especially in this kind of jammy realm that we're in, I feel like sometimes people try to embellish before they've created more of a melody. So they've gone right to the embellishment part without building a solid foundation, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use a really easy, template, and then we'll build off of that. But the idea is, you can only play what you hear and what you see. And if we don't start with a basic foundation, it's going to be hard to start embellishing because we don't have anything we're going off of. So I just want to kind of pop in and say that, start simple. Like that's what Trey does just about every time. Think of like a really good Harry Hood or Slave to the Traffic Light, or Reba, these ones that build really slowly. And he starts off so simply. Usually it's just a couple notes, maybe 2 notes. So let's get back into this this worksheet here. And Okay, let's start going through each one in a little more detail in terms of our specific sand example here. So in this scenario, I happen to know that this has an A Dorian vibe to it. Now I know that because I have some experience with it. But if you hadn't heard this song, let's suppose you never heard Sand before. There's some stuff. Really, it's more to do with what Paige is playing that will cue you into the fact that it's Dorian, and really more specifically, at times Paige will play the note F sharp in some of his rhythm stuff. Specifically, if you really want to nerd out, look up Sand, maybe after the stream, or pause the stream, do it right now, and go to about the 1 minute mark on the studio version that's just up on YouTube. And I believe it's exactly at like 103. There's a chord that Paige strikes. And that's what I'm talking about. So like, I don't want to say too much more than that. Just do a little ear training and see if you can pick out the thing I'm talking about. Again, either do it now or do it later, but that's a little bit of ear training. But once we know we're in like an A Dorian kind of vibe, like we can hear that the root is A, we can hear that it's a minor kind of vibe. And then when we put together the info of those couple things with Paige's chord that he hits, where he hits this F sharp at one point, I don't want to give away too much, but that'll tell us we're in A Dorian. And then from there, we can reverse engineer, and just kind of backtrack and figure out what key we're in. Because remember, Dorian is always the second degree of the key you're in. And therefore, if we're playing A Dorian, we just go a whole step back, or 2 frets back to the left from the root note, and that will give you the root of the major key you're playing in. So that's the first thing. So we're kind of figuring out our key center. And also, I should have said this is in 4/4. I kind of forgot about the key signature part, but this is in 4/4, and it's in the key of G major, but we're playing A Dorian. So now moving on from there, the second thing on this checklist is about taking stock of the chords that are available to use. Now, I'm definitely going to have some stuff to add to this, but this is the really simple bird's eye view. So we figured out we're in the key of G major, and so now we just plug in the diatonic chords for that key. And this part is kind of cool because it's just a formula that will not change on you. This is just the major scale pattern, and the first degree will be G major. And I just did these as triads, and then obviously they could be 7th chords. The second is Dorian, that's A minor, and then Phrygian would be B, but more on that in a little bit. C is the 4th, D is the 5th, E minor is the 6th, and F sharp diminished would be your Locrian kind of diminished triad. Now, like I say here, under those chords, we can come up with other really interesting chords and arpeggios to use, but this gives us something to get started. So I'm going to kind of pop in and out of this graphic here as we go. Okay, let's just take those couple things so far. And like I mentioned, you can come up with even more interesting chord ideas. And I'm so big on the chord stuff. Notice I'm not really talking too much about the scales yet, but the chords give you like a skeleton that you can really work out of. And I find them, I think it's the space that's built into a chord that I think is its greatest strength. Think of a scale. It's just a set sequence, and we're not really skipping. Well, we're skipping things, but we're going through every note of the musical alphabet. Whereas with a chord, baked into the cake is space. And so you're skipping every other scale tone, basically. I mean, that's a very simple way to put it, but again, I think it's that space that it leaves that's very interesting, and that there's something to be said for that in terms of thinking of when you play and when you leave a rest, and I'll get into that later. But let me go close up here, and let's, I wanted to give an example of how you could come up with some different stuff. Now, this is actually something that I was talking to Jeremy about the other night on our Q&A session, because Sand and Tube, I believe Tube, that jam is also an A kind of Dorian vibe. I haven't played it in a while, but that was my memory from it. And I know it changes and goes to like a bluesy shuffle like halfway through, but leading up to that, it's like an A Dorian thing. And here was what I was sharing with Jeremy, and I'm going to share it with you guys now, as a way to get some kind of more kind of outside sounds, or if you're feeling stuck or bored. Take your home bass scale. Let's start with that. Would be A minor pentatonic. And And I know I was talking about chords, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I want to give you a way to think about things. Okay, so we know we can play some A minor pentatonic, and I also already said that it's Dorian, and what Dorian means is you just think of, even if we don't take a minor scale, just take the minor pentatonic scale, and just add the major 6. And the major 6 is an F sharp. So if you have a note on the E string, and you want a little shortcut to find the 6th, you can jump down 2 strings and back 1 fret to the left, and that will give you the 6th. Then we can kind of figure out, okay, that's an F sharp, and we can take stock of it. Here's another F sharp. So now if we take that and put it back into our pentatonic, we've got this beautiful sound. It was already beautiful with just pentatonic anyway, but that F sharp really has a great vibe to it that it just brings to the table. So now, here's what I was saying to Jeremy is that, okay, cool. Now we've got a couple interesting things already that we can play around with, but I'd also say, this is just me, but if I think of minor pentatonic, I'm like automatically including the blues scale. So what I mean by that, the minor blues scale, I should say, is I would really be thinking of this. And then just doing it again. So there's the blue note. So now we've got an interesting situation, because now we've got, when we combine those things, we've got it ends up that we're almost playing everything already. But here's what I want to really get to here. There's 2 tones that I want to ask you, and I'm gonna put it as a question to you guys. Whoever wants to chime in. Okay, what chord could you think of that you could build that has the note F sharp? And then right here, I'm gonna call this is the blue note we were doing. And I know typically we would think of that as a flat 5. But I'm actually going to name it for a specific reason. This is a little clue. I'm going to name that a D sharp. So if you're out there watching, what chord can you think of that has an F sharp and a D sharp in it? It's missing 1 note to make it a triad. So I'm going to leave that out there for a second. I'm going to come back to that. But there will be something kind of fun we can throw in with that. And then I also want to throw another idea out there to you guys, which is this. If you look at what you're really playing when you play like a Dorian vibe, if you were to turn that into a chord, you could turn it into, let's say, an A minor 6. Like that would be a chord that has the minor 3rd in it. It has the major 6 in it, and it just gives off kind of a Dorian sound. So one way you could do that, like take an A minor like this, and then if you put your pinky, for example, on the 7th fret where that F sharp is, and if we put an open A, we've got this really pretty kind of sounding chord already. Ah, Brendan, right on, man. Yes, B major, 100%. Okay, so Brendan answered in. What's up, Brendan? So that's exactly what I was looking for, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but nice work. That's exactly what I was looking for. So you've got a B major triad. And remember earlier when I was talking about the diatonic chord family, and I was like, we're going to come back to Phrygian. Well, that was what I was talking about. We'll come back to that in a second, but I want to come back to this A minor 6 kind of thing. Now, if you're holding your guitar, and I hope you guys are playing along with me here so you can kind of put this stuff to work, but I'm gonna challenge you guys again to tell me, okay, look at this right here. We've got an A. I'm doubling the A. There's a C that's the minor 3rd. We got a major 6 in there. And then, look at that. And then could you think of another chord, even just by the way it looks, that reminds you of? So right here, I would think of that as D sharp diminished. Yeah, we're going to come back to that 100%. Is that Jeff? Right on. D sharp diminished. I love that. Yes. More on that in a minute. Okay, so now, shoot, I'm losing my train of thought. Okay, so right here, if you look at this, here's my main point. If you just bar your finger like that, you've got a D7. So I always love the relationship between, let me come back to having a head here. I love the relationship between Dorian and Mixolydian in the key. Brian's saying something diminished. Yeah, you guys are onto it. I'm going to come back to that. But the thing I was going to say here is that if, yeah, you guys are killing it. Okay, I'm in the chat. I don't know how much of a delay there's going to be for this, but I'm going to put up the notes that make up basically an A minor 6 that I was playing. I didn't have a fifth in there, but I'm going to include that. So I'm going to go A, C, E, and then I'm going to put F sharp on top right there. Okay. And this is, we did this in the Q&A the other day too. Oh, right on, Jeff. Thanks for joining, man. Good to see you. Thanks for joining in. Okay, I had these guys do a similar thing in our group session. So I wrote out A, C, E, and F sharp. And there's another chord that you can get out of that. But here's the thing. The root note of the chord I'm referencing is not written there. I'm going to let that kind of just simmer for a second. I'm going to keep things moving, but I really like, I'm a really big fan of like the Socratic method. I don't want to just tell you guys stuff because it's not fun that way. And you'll get way more out of it if you answer it yourself. So if you're ever like, why does this guy ask so many questions? That's why I believe fundamentally that the wisdom is there in you. I'm going to get a little woo on you guys, but the wisdom is there and it has to be drawn out. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people that maybe didn't feel like they knew a lot of music theory stuff, but turns out they really did know it. They just didn't know the name for it, or they were like, oh, that's what you call that thing. So again, my premise is there's so much potential and so much wisdom in everybody. You right out there watching right now, it's there. We have to draw it out, and it can't be drawn out if I just give answers. So anyway, look at the notes there and figure out what other chord could come out of that. And I'll also give a clue. It's a dominant chord. Okay, I'm going to go back to the worksheet for a minute while people are potentially looking or thinking of the answer for that. Okay, so we're on number 2 in our checklist here. We're thinking of the key, the mode. We're thinking of the chords that go with it. I'm going to, we'll come back to, some more arpeggios and things we can use. But then again, let's move along to number 3. Okay, what scales and modes are available? I already covered some of that. A minor pentatonic, A blues scale, or I should say minor blues scale. We've got A Dorian we can use. And then I want to stay on this one for a moment. Because, when you have, let's say we've established that we're in the key of G and that we want to play a Dorian vibe. Let me go close up here. Another thing to play around with is then think of, okay, what are the scale tones for this chord? Okay, we've got and let's just do a triad at first, an A minor. We've got an A, we've got a C, we've got an E, and there's a G if you did a 7th, but like I said, I'm going to just keep it to a triad. So here's an A minor right here. One thing to think about is trying to build off of, if you're going to use scale patterns or mode patterns, try to build them off of the chord tones of the chord you're playing. So here is our A, and I already talked a little bit about Dorian, but if you want to play the full version of, oh, right on, that's it. Okay, now I hope I don't mess up your name. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Stavros, and so sorry, man, if I messed up your name. But D9, that is exactly it. Right on, man. You guys are killing it. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that in a second. But, go through and just take stock of what scale patterns you have. So A, Dorian. And you could play it a bunch of different ways. Like, I'm going to come back to that in a second. But we've got Dorian. But then, okay, what mode would be the next scale tone? Well, that would be C. Oh, right on. Okay. Right on, man. Well, good job on the D9. That was it. I'm somewhat impressed that I didn't totally mess up your name, but very cool. Thank you so much. It's D9. I'm going to come back to that. Now, if we start on C, then we'd be playing C Lydian. And then basically what you're going to find is this... I can't talk and do it at the same time. Let me do that more slowly. So here's Lydian. It's got that raised fourth. And then, if we build off of E, then that would be E Aeolian in this key, because remember, we're in the key of G major. And then from there, you could, if you want to play it with the same position here, you could do that. You could start with your pinky, you could start with your index. If you start with your index, that's a really easy pattern. You just go, and you can take it farther. You can do it here. So that'll tie into a point I'm going to make in a little bit. But try playing the modes that are based off of the chord tones rather than just the root note of the chord. Now, it's true that it's not going to sound like C Lydian if I'm playing against an A minor vamp, but it is useful in terms of orientation and making your way across the fretboard. So it will not sound like C Lydian. It'll still sound like A Dorian, but it'll give you a different approach, and I think that's really cool. Same thing with E Aeolian in that scenario. It won't sound like Aeolian unless somebody's playing like an E minor against it. But again, it gives you different options and can kind of open things up. So let's come back over here and keep moving through our checklist. And in a minute, I'm going to put the jam track on, and I'll kind of play through some stuff and show you guys as we go. Okay, now number 4, how can I use the above elements to create a motif? Okay, so this is what everything's building up to, because we could have all these scales and even the arpeggios and all this really cool stuff to play with, but if we can't create a melody, then none of it's really, it's not going to be all that interesting. So here's the idea. I'm going to show you how you can take one concept, which is going to be an A minor triad, and then mix it with something rhythmic. And if you're not as comfortable with rhythm stuff, steal from something else you know. So that's what I'm doing in this case. I'm going to combine an A minor triad with the rhythm of hot cross buns. And I use that because it's simple, everybody knows that, and it's easy to tweak it. And when I was talking earlier about starting with a melody and then embellishing, this is what I'm talking about. Start with something very simple, and I'm talking hot cross buns level simplicity. So I'm going to play each one of these. I'm going to start with the one at the top, and then I go through a few different iterations of it, and that ties into point number 5. So here's what it looks and sounds like using an A minor triad with the hot cross buns rhythm. Okay, now what I want to do is put on the track, and I'm going to try this, and if you guys are still hanging with me, please let me know if this comes out all like delayed and weird sounding. I really want to try to use the actual jam track, but if it's weird, I have a loop on my pedal board and I can just do that. But let me know how this sounds. I'm going to play what I just did against the track. Again. Right on. Okay, so hopefully hopefully that sounded okay to you guys. All right, now that's okay. We're going to use that as our foundation to build things off of. And again, what I'm trying to present here is a way you can do restricted practice and get better at improvising, because improvising can seem like this elusive thing, but it really can be practical stuff that helps you get better at it. Like there's definitely methodical ways to improve on it. So what I'm going to show now is, or this is the point of number 5 on the checklist, is how many different ways can I play that same motif. So I just put a couple different versions of it, but there are tons of other ways you could do it. Really, this kind of reminds me, I'll come back to this in a second. What this reminds me of, what I'm about to show, is if you've ever seen Trey's Instagram video, the Sea to Shining Sea video. I think that is just, I'm constantly, amazed and grateful beyond words that Trey is my favorite guitarist of all time, and the idea that he is getting on social media and sharing things with us, you know, and just sharing his you know, his wisdom is unbelievable. But that Sea to Shining Sea video, really what it's about is what I'm about to show, being able to do the same thing in many different ways so that you're mapping out the terrain of the fretboard. The guitar, you know, I was saying this to the guys on the chat the other day. Yeah, okay, right on. Yeah, that Sea to Shining Sea is so good. It's so good. But I was saying this to the guys in the group chat the other day, is that remind yourself, if you're ever beating yourself up about where you're at with the guitar, or like wishing you were better, or why isn't it going better? Why am I stuck? You know, stuff like that. Obviously there's always work to do, but remind yourself that what you're trying to do is play a really complicated instrument. You know, I think sometimes we can forget, because the guitar is one of those instruments that's like really easy to get going on. Like we can get a couple chords and be like, okay, now I'm on my way. But it's really complicated. The fretboard is not, you know, the easiest thing to navigate, and that's why I'm trying to share these things, so you have a methodical way to find your way forward and have many different paths. But anyway, if you're ever beating yourself up, remind yourself you were a brave soul for trying to play the guitar. It's an incredibly difficult instrument, and it just takes time. And sometimes we just have to know what we're looking for in the first place. So just a little word of encouragement. Again, back to the idea, you know, whoever you are out there watching this video, this much I can guarantee: you have something unique and significant to share through your music, through your voice, and it's going to be different than anybody else. And the tricky part is not getting too hung up on, oh, well, you know, Trey can do this, or John Schofield could do this, or Jimmy Page could do this. It's like, yeah, they all have things they can do, and so do you. You know, that much I can guarantee you. Without even knowing who you are out there, I can tell you that you have something to offer. Let's come on back. That's enough inspirational stuff for now. Let me go back to the worksheet. And okay, now what I'm going to do is, for number 5 here, version 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm just going to play the same thing, but I'm playing it in different ways. Now, I can't show you guys my guitar and the tabs at the same time, but just know I'm going to say what I'm playing. Just take my word for it. I'm playing what's on the tabs right now. Okay, so version 1 is open E, first fret of B, second fret of G. And then you just do that again. Then. In fact, it's kind of cool you guys can't see what I'm doing, because now you can really listen to the difference. Now I'm going to play the exact same thing, but in a different position. Now I'm going to use my pinky finger on the 5th fret of the B string for version 2, and it'll go like this. It already sounds different to me. Now here's version 3. I'm going to go to the 9th fret with my ring finger and play it there. And then finally, and this isn't by any means the only other way you could play this. There are tons of other ways, but I'm going to put my index finger on the 9th fret and play it there. Right on. Okay, so let me get rid of this stuff again and go close up. So basically what I just went through, I'll just show it again. So I started, you know, the first version was here. And I'm going to put the loop on. Oh, actually, let me just put the jam track on again. I'm taking it. It didn't sound totally out of whack and delayed because nobody commented. So I'm going to go with it again. You know, if you guys hear anything weird, let me know. So here's the first thing I did. Then I went. And then. Okay, right on. Okay, so Stavros is saying it was a little delayed. Bummer. Okay, I got to figure that out. Anyway, I'll use the loop pedal moving forward and just do it like that. But hopefully you guys got the idea there. Now, you guys let me know. I don't know, like there's a world of difference between the sound here and then like there's a murkiness to this one. It's a little warmer. I don't mean murky in a negative way, but this is brighter. And this is just a little darker or something. I don't know how to explain it. A little more rounded just because the strings are different and all of that. At any rate, that's the next step. But that thing I just did, I would encourage you, and anybody that's worked with me, they probably are sick of me saying this, but you do the same thing in as many different ways as you can. You will never get bored, and you'll never get lost in the guitar if you really practice like that. And so that's why I practice my scales that way. Like start with the pinky, start with the middle, start with the index. And go through all your stuff that way. And then, that applies to anything. You could try an arpeggio that way. So I was talking about an A minor 6. You could be here. You could do it here. So like go through and ask yourself, how many different ways can I do the same thing? All right, now let's go back to our checklist and let me know how everything's going so far. If you guys have any comments on like how you approach things, do you guys do the same kind of thing? Is there a process you guys like to, is there a process you use when you're getting going on a jam or, let me know. Okay, let me read this question here from Integrated Life Channel. I like that name. Any chance in the future you can cover Trey's bluegrass rhythm like the strum pattern during the piano solo in Rift? Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I've had a couple. Let me go back here and pop in. The bluegrass stuff, I want to dig into that more. I got a couple requests for a couple more kind of bluegrassy tunes, and now Rift I've done, and I'd have to go back, and I don't remember exactly off the top of my head what he was doing. This is a long-winded answer. Yes is the answer, but let me look at that, and I got to get my bearings. I have to say I'm not as experienced in the music and like the culture of bluegrass and stuff, so I have a little catching up to do with that. I was very inspired seeing Billy Strings play with Fish last summer, so yes, but give me a minute to kind of get my act together. Now Rift, I'll have to I do have that charted out. In fact, right now, if you I'll drop a link to the PDF. Let me see here. Just give me a second, guys. I'm gonna drop this in the chat Dropbox. Okay, Rift, and here we go. Okay, let me copy this. And I will share it with you guys, and then you can take a look. Okay, here we go. This comes to mind, but he does that style strumming a bit. Yeah, totally. Okay, there you go. There is a link to Rift. Part of that is me just putting it out there so I remember to look at it as well. So I hope that helps. But I will get back to that. Shoot, now I got to remember what the heck was I talking about a minute ago. Let me go back to the worksheet here. Okay, so we've gone through a bunch of different ways we could play hot cross buns. So it's cool. We've got some different iterations, but obviously that's not all that exciting. So let's see if we can spice things up a little bit. So now this is the part where things get a little more interesting. I also note, if you look at the top, there's several more ways you could play this, but I hope it gives you the idea of the abundance of options. Like, that's the thing. It's like an embarrassment of riches, all the different ways we could do stuff. That's my main message. And if you're wondering, well, why is it important to be able to do the same thing different ways? It's because this point I make here, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Each one of those iterations will inspire a different approach based on the position, the fingers, and the string combinations. So I think that's why it's so important to have those different ways you can do the same thing, is because while the guitar is incredibly expressive and we can really we can really draw on a lot of different sounds, if we only stay with like a couple comfortable shapes or positions, we're really missing out on, honestly, a lot of fun. So anyway, now the next step is to say, okay, well, how many different ways can I embellish the motif? So now what I'm going to do next is take the A minor / hot cross buns inspired theme. I'm going to use the fingering that I did from version 4 from the previous page, and I'm going to look at a couple different ways to embellish it. Now what I mean is I'm going to take the original melody and I'm going to start to kind of spruce it up a little bit. But this idea I'm going to draw from first is I'm actually studying and sharing a lot of the stuff I'm working on with a lot of the students I'm working with. I'm studying this book called Connecting Chords with Linear Harmony. I think I mentioned it before on the stream, and it's excellent. But one way he suggests, the author's name is Bert Lagan, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, but he suggests when you go to embellish, start with rhythmic embellishment. So in other words, before changing the notes or anything, challenge yourself to come up with a bit of a different rhythmic scheme, a different rhythmic pattern. And that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to use the looper now on my pedal board because the delay, and I'll show you guys because you're going to want to hear this against a metronome. But remember that our first version was like this. It was like... Now what I'm going to do is instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to offset the first one. I'm going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 1 and triplet, 1 and triplet. So instantly to me, that's getting more exciting already. So let me do that against the track. First, I'm going to do the original version, the kind of plain quarter note rhythm, and then I'll plug in what I just did. So here we go. One, two, ready. Here's the original. Now here's the offset. 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4. 1 and triplet, 3 and triplet, 1 and 2 and... So just so simple. I haven't changed a single note or anything like that. And just in case you want to, see that, let me get rid of this and I'll just go close up again. And here's what I did. Just has a little more life to it, a little more of an interesting thing going on. Now the next thing, this is kind of cool. I'm just throwing a couple ideas out there for ways to embellish. This is by no means like an exhaustive list of how you can embellish things, but a couple tangible, like real world things you can do to get more out of your playing, like immediately. Okay, now in the next iteration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to kind of the original thing, just the hot cross buns kind of thing using the A minor triad. And now I'm going to add in the 5th of the home chord. What I mean by that is if we think of the home chord for our vamp, and let me see, can I get this a little bigger? Let me see. Whoop, I don't know what I did. Well, hopefully you guys can see that. At any rate, I took the theme and I took the home chord, which is A minor, and I thought to myself, okay, what's the 5th of A minor? Well, the 5th of A minor is E. So now all I'm going to do is throw in the note E in between things. And this really creates this almost like classical kind of sound. So where I'm working from now is I'm going to go to that kind of version 3 fingering that actually version 4. And I'm going to use that. In a second, I'll take the tabs off so you can see what I'm doing. But I'm going to go E, then E here on the 12th fret. And I know you guys can't see, but I'll show in a second. Almost has like a stash thing. In a second, I'll play it to the track. And then for the triplets, so I kept the triplets, but I went 1 and triplet and triplet. Now, rhythmically, the way that goes is 1E and a 2, oops, 1E and a 2 and 3 and a 4 and 1 and a, then 1 and triplet 1 and triplet 1. Let me get rid of that so you can see it, and I'll do it with the track. And here we go. 1, 2, and I'm in like a triad shape like this. Right on. So hopefully you're starting to get a sense of how simply we started out. Everything was very simple. You almost can't get easier than hot cross buns. We tweaked a little rhythm. Now we're adding a little bit of flavor with some different notes to it, because before changing the rhythm, or before this iteration of it, the notes hadn't changed at all. Now we're starting to add some stuff in. And now the next thing I'm going to show in terms of a different way to embellish is, this is kind of like a thing you see a lot in jazz music, and Jerry Garcia would do this kind of thing. It's neighboring notes. Oh, there we go. I can make it a little bigger like that. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it really big and then move this thing so you guys can see this, because I feel like that's kind of small. Right on. There we go. Okay, so this last version, the tabs toward the bottom, what I'm going to do is apply this concept called neighboring notes. In fact, you know what? Let me, sorry guys, I'm jumping around. Let me actually show this first. I think it'll be easier like this. Now, remember that we're using an A minor triad. Now, the concept for neighboring notes or enclosures is that you usually start a scale tone above what you're doing, a semitone under, and then you go to the target note. I just realized looking at the tabs that I put an F natural instead of an F sharp, I think. So I'll have to tweak that, but the same thing applies. I'll just change it in real time now. But instead of just going right to E, what I'm going to do is go one scale tone above, which is F sharp, a semitone under, which is going to be this D sharp / E flat, which is that blue note, by the way. And then you go to the targeted note. So we're targeting E, but we enclose it like that. Now the next note we're going to hit is a C, but again we go a scale tone above, a semitone under, to the target. So far we've got. And then for the A, because we're targeting A next, we do a scale tone above, which is the note B, a semitone under, which is a G sharp, and then the target is A. So now we've got. Now it's starting to get kind of jazzy sounding and almost like, I don't know if I'd call it outside, but maybe a little bit. At any rate, it's a little more interesting. There's a little more spice. So now let me put the tabs back up now that you guys have seen kind of where I'm working from. And again, this is this first part. Now, I wrote 10th fret here. I meant to write 11th fret. So just, I'll update the worksheet. But that's what this is. Now, what I'm doing is applying a triplet to the rhythm, because remember we started out with quarter notes like 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, the last note is a half note. So now we're going to do triplets. So triplet, 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 hold. Triplet, triplet, triplet. Now for the next part, instead of going, you know, the one a penny, like that, now we're going to use a triplet, but we're going to do the neighboring note. And then for the next one, and now I'm on the last line. So really fun stuff there. Let me get rid of this and I'll play it with the track. So as a recap. And then. Now let's hear it with the loop. cool. I kind of messed up that last part, but really cool. So let me try that again. There it is. And then the last part will be again with the track. Now, even though I'm kind of messing that up, it's actually still sounding kind of fun and interesting. Whereas, you know, we started out with this hot cross buns thing, and now we're getting this whole different sound out of it. And then what you can start to do is, as you play around with these things, and these are really, like I said, very practical, tangible things, then you can mix and match. Like one round, maybe you do the offbeat thing. That's what I started with. And then and from there, then things can kind of drive forward. And I'm not saying everything in your jam is going to be this kind of, you know, systematic, like going through things like this. But the idea is if you practice this way, it just comes out more naturally, just like in speech. You know, if you work on building up your vocab, you know, it takes time, but it will just come out naturally after enough repetition. That's the idea here. Although sometimes if you're in a jam and there's like nerves going on, like, you know, and let me know, do you guys, like anybody else out there playing in a band? Like I know a couple of people I work with are in Fish cover bands or just kind of general cover bands. But if so, you probably know that feeling when you go out to play. Sometimes it's kind of like the Mike Tyson quote, which I love. Everybody has a plan till you get punched in the face. And it's like you might have a plan ahead of time, but then when it's time to play and there's noise and, you know, all this kind of stuff is going on and all these other variables, having a little mental checklist like the one I'm sharing here can go a long way, because it can just kind of ground you. It can bring things back to a focus, and you can build things out from there. So that's my main hope, is it gives you something that you can build off of. But, you know, like the things that I just showed so far, you know, this is just scratching the surface of what you could do. So let me come back to kind of my regular size here. Give me a second. Let's get this all back on the page. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's go to the next page, and let me see. Okay, each one of this is what I wanted to kind of close out with, is that each one of the elements from the checklist can be greatly expanded on. That's kind of what I was just saying. I just wanted to share a couple ways you can take what I just shared and then even build on it more. Now, in the first item on the checklist, especially if playing over a vamp, maybe consider drawing from multiple key or modal centers. So like in our example here, instead of just thinking of A Dorian, maybe mix in a little A melodic minor. And I'll come back to like some examples of how you can do what I'm describing there. But, you know, tying into what I just said with that, if you draw from multiple different key centers, then that'll add greatly to the number of chords you'll get. So let me pop back off. I keep going back and forth. Hopefully this isn't annoying going back and forth. But like if you take what I just said in those first two things, okay, let's take A Dorian. So we know we've got, and we're in the key of G major for that. We've got G major 7 if we want to do seventh chords, A minor 7 or A minor 6. We've got B minor 7. Although we played around with how we could finagle our way into a B7. Oh, I got to come back to that. Actually, okay, while I'm talking about the chords, I was talking about that B chord. I never came back to that. So, and by the way, thank you, Maurice, for the shout out. Yeah, please hit that like button. And thanks, Maurice, for always being an advocate. So I had mentioned that B chord, and then I think Jeff said something about D sharp diminished, and I never came back. So let me come back over here. This was part of what I was saying to Jeremy, who inspired this whole concept for this lesson, is that, like, if you're feeling stuck, do something that is a little unusual or outside the box, and that'll usually that'll get you unstuck. And so just from what we did, we were looking at the A blues scale and the fact that we were in a Dorian kind of scenario, and I asked, okay, what chord could you see from this F sharp and this D sharp? And we got a B chord out of that. Now, because we're in the key that we're in, we know that we have an A as well, because our home chord is an A minor, so we know that the note A is at play, which means that our B is a B7. And what's more is that, and I think this was what Jeff was driving at. Jeff, if you're still out there, man, good point. If I take this D sharp right here, that literally is diminished right there, and then I could play the C that's also in the key. Like, C is already there. There's nothing outside we're drawing from. And you get diminished elements. So what I'm going to do is I'll play around, kind of playing around with that hot cross buns kind of vibe. I'll tweak it, and I'm going to throw in elements of a B7. Now, the thing is, you've got a B7 here, again, tying into the checklist. Oops, sorry, the focus went out there. But let me see. There we go. If you figure out one element you like, okay, I'm going to put a B7 against this. Well, how many different ways can I play a B7? That's one, but here's another. Oh, here's another. Here's another. Here's another. So you've got, here's another. There's so many different ways. Take the time to map that stuff out. Here's yet another way, or another way here. So I'm going to put the jam on. I'm going to play around with it for a second and just listen to the way this B7 sounds. It's kind of a little unusual. It's probably not for everybody, but if you're feeling stuck, adding something like this can help, get you unstuck. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of that hot cross buns, but I'll modify it a little bit. Also, and I should have mentioned this, B augmented is also a really cool choice. B augmented works really well because we've got a B in the key we're playing in. Here's that note from the blues scale, and then G is in there too, so we can use elements of that. It has that diminished sound. And now, actually, this reminded me, if you watch my lesson from last week, I talked about this kind of, I was talking about chords that Trey does, and that's a really fun way to tie it into what you're doing. So here's a B. There's an augmented. So just that kind of almost sneaky diminished sound gets put in there, really mostly because of that F sharp or the D sharp rather, as well as the F sharp that's in there. Now, there's also, and I gotta I gotta wrap it up pretty soon, but I could go on all night about different ways you can go about this. There is another concept, I think I talked about this like last month, the family of chords concept. That's kind of a Barry Harris thing. But basically, if you can play a dominant chord in one position, practice just moving that in minor third intervals. And one thing that you'll land on, and this is something that Stavros was saying earlier, is that you can also get a D9 out of this. So remember I put on the chat, I put an A, a C, an E. Oh, shoot. Yeah, that's what I did, and an F sharp. And so if you do that, but start with a D, you get a D9. And so basically, A Dorian shares a ton in common with D Mixolydian. So what I like to do is I like to use D7 shapes, but I won't hang on the D. Like, that's the thing. D is the fourth of A, and it's not that it's the worst note in the world, but you just probably don't want to hang on that because it'll sound really unresolved. And that doesn't mean we can't use it though, because we can use it as a lead-in. Like, so here's what that would sound like if I use a shape like that, and let me turn like that. So I'm just using a D9, putting an E on top, like that. Again. So D7 is another really fun one. You've got a D7 or a D9 right here. So just, that's another thing is like if you're feeling stuck or you're feeling bored, think of things that are really related to what you're working with. So in this case, A Dorian, but not exactly that. And that'll get you out of like a myopic vision, because one thing we can sometimes get into is like, okay, I'm playing A Dorian, so I have to do A-centered things, but it really doesn't have to be that way. Okay, let me catch up here. Jeff is saying, I love adding diminished and minor 7 flat 5 to blues Dorian scale. It's already there, but specifically omitting certain notes is a good way to break up the redundant stuff. Oh yeah, and I knew you meant adding and not asking. That's a great point. Like, and Jeff just hit on something. I couldn't have said it better myself. What I'm trying to share is stuff that's already there. It's just that if we don't see it, we can't really use it. And that's what it's all about. Like, it's increasing our vision. And I mean that vision, like, you know how musicians will talk about the sound had a color to it. Like, I mean it in that kind of way, like vision in terms of, seeing things on the fretboard, but also being able to see all the patterns that are there. Because again, I feel like I got to get like a sign put up. All things are in all places at all times, always. Jeff will know I say that all the time. But it's not true that things will be in the same form in all places. They'll take on different forms, and that's where the legwork is. So anyway, let me pause. I've said a lot, and I want to make sure that everybody's cool. And if anybody has any questions or comments, there's a handful of you guys still hanging. If you go out to play and you have to play over a vampy kind of jam, what kinds of things go through your head? Like, do you have like a go-to thing you like to think of to start things off? Do you have like maybe there's like a little mantra you tell yourself? Like, and it could be completely separate from music theory stuff. Like, I remember going to my teacher, Chris. He's my piano teacher and just overall music teacher. And I remember going to him when I was really playing in the Fish cover band I was doing. I wasn't used to people actually showing up to my shows because I used to play original music. And as Maurice, if he's still hanging, he'll tell you, we would work so hard on our original music. This is like in our early 20s. And, we weren't used to people showing up. There'd be like 10 people at our shows. But then I went and I did a Fish cover band, and our second show sold out. And that I was like, well, I wasn't used to that. And I got a lot of anxiety, like performance anxiety. And I went to my teacher and I said, hey man, I'm getting very anxious before I play. I'm worried about, I don't want to mess up. Will it be good enough? Like, this is my favorite band, my favorite guitarist. I don't want to like misrepresent it. Also, it feels funny to play a tribute show. Like, there are all these kind of funny things. And really, he said the best thing to me, and it had nothing to do with music theory or strategy on how to jam or anything like that. He said, hey man, if you're feeling like that, think about this one question. How can I be of service to this audience? And I love that because it flipped it so around. Because really, if I were being honest with myself, all those feelings of anxiety and all this kind of stuff, those were all ego driven. Like, what if I don't do the right thing? What if I'm, all this kind of stuff, I-centered stuff. And I love that he flipped it around and just put it toward, how can I make a really great experience out of this for the people watching? Okay, so then Sita Moon is saying, I try to start simple, focus on rhythmic motifs, maybe just 3 or 4 notes. Pretend I'm a drummer. Oh, man. I love that. I love that. In fact, I meant to, there's so much stuff I meant to say. That's okay. I'll do more streams, so it's all good. But one thing I love to do, and this is kind of what I was trying to get into with the hot cross buns thing, is like, again, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling bored with your stuff, think like a drummer. Like that is totally that. Like that's such a good strategy, and I love what Cedar Moon's saying about using just 3 or 4 notes. Like notice in the hot cross buns thing, yeah, okay, that wasn't the greatest like groundbreaking melody of all time, but it was simple and it was like repeatable. I don't know if it's memorable, but I could remember the notes. It was simple enough to build off of. And I think that those are words of wisdom. Start simple with a rhythmic motif. I love that. That was a great comment. Brian, I try so hard with start slow, start simple mantra, but go off into noodle land way too easy. I can relate to that. I bet you everybody watching could relate to that. Oh shoot, I just missed just joined, but nice topics. Right on, meow. Thank you for joining. Brian, I can relate to that, man. That's kind of what I was saying with the Mike Tyson thing. Like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. We all have a plan until we're in it, and then it's kind of like everything goes out the window. And look, it's fun to kind of noodle around, but the idea here is to it's not like I don't want to like how do I say it? Noodling gets a bad name. I think there are some merits to just freely playing, but the thing I'm talking about with the restricted practice, it's a way that we can get more out of the noodling kind of tendencies. Okay, now listen to Sonny Rollins solo on St. Thomas, for example. Okay, cool. I'm gonna check that out. I love this is what I'm talking about. It's not always like I certainly don't have all the answers, so I love hearing how you guys are thinking about things or songs to listen to. Like I've never heard that, so I'm looking forward to checking that out. Right on, guys. Well, this was a really cool session. I'll get back to more jam breakdown stuff. Last week we did Funky Bitch, and then next week what I'm gonna do is the topic will be more around like how to actually kind of like what I talked about tonight, but more in terms of rhythmic vamping. Like, okay, what can we do to keep ourselves occupied and keep things interesting when we're not building melodic motifs, but we're playing rhythm stuff, comping and stuff like that. So that's more of what we'll get into next time. Let's see here. Okay, I got to catch up here. Some of my favorite jams are when I'll try to make a little motif that the whole band plays with and usually develops in the peak. Yes, that's the best. If you could get your band to get on board with the motif and building on that, I mean, that's incredible. And then this next comment, that's so true. Good way to get outside of your own head for performing. Yeah, oh, you're talking about the tip from my teacher, Chris. Yeah. Okay, and then you're asking off topic, but do you have a preferred slowdown transcribing software? So Dead Flower Blues, I do use the amazing slowdowner. In fact, I can put it up on screen, and I've used this before, but I'll show you guys. Let me see. There it is. So like this is from last week when I was doing Funky Bitch, and it's kind of cool. You can save different presets, or not presets, but you can save different sections of the song, and you can slow it down. You can even change the key. Like let's say there's some bands that tune down to like E flat, like Guns N' Roses. I just happen to remember they tuned to E flat. So like if you don't feel like tuning your guitar down, you can just pitch it up, a whole step a semitone, and away you go. I really like this one. I definitely recommend the iPad version versus the one I have is the desktop. I have it because I kind of need to have it in multiple places. But the iPad one has way more functionality and you can save a lot more loops. I think this one you can only save 10, and the iPad one is like pretty much unlimited. And the iPad one I think is significantly cheaper. So that's another kind of benefit. In terms of transcribing software, I use Notion, and I'll share that again. Like that's what I was using earlier today when I was doing this the prep for the lesson today. Let me share that. Let me see, where is it at? Notion. So here's Notion. Whoop, I didn't mean to do that. It's okay. Like I sometimes I wish I used a different one. Like sometimes it really drives me crazy, this one, but it works fine enough. Like this is what I was doing to prep for the worksheet stuff earlier. So anyway, I use the amazing slowdowner to slow stuff down, and then I write it out, and I do it manually. Here I enter each note in on the fretboard, and it's very tedious and annoying, but it's for the love of music. Okay. Okay, Brian saying your stuff's been huge help getting away from aimless noodling. Man, I'm so happy to help. And noodle on, brother. Give yourself noodle time. But yeah, I'm happy to help you kind of add to it. We'll say it that way. Sonny's live souls from 80s were also extended jam type stuff. Okay, cool. I got to really get in there and check that out. And Jeff saying I would love a rhythmic vamp lesson. Well, you're in luck, my friend. We're going to do it next week. Rip, who runs Playing with the Band YouTube channel, he's in my like featured YouTube channels. But you guys know Rip, I'm sure. He's going to prep some stuff, and we'll cover some stuff like what happens on Tube when he's jamming, or like 2001, stuff like that. Okay, and then Dead Flower Blues is asking, I'm assuming for the slowdowner, can you just download like an MP3? How do you get the tune into it? So I'll show you right now. I was going to explain it, but I'll just show you right now how you do it. So I'll go back to the amazing slowdowner, and okay, you see this section here. Let me see here. I've got a so I'll take like I can't, I'm juggling some different software here, guys. So I apologize if I'm kind of all over the place. Where the heck did that go? Okay, here's the amazing slowdowner. And okay, there we go. Okay, so what I would do is I just let's say I take a track and I just drag it into that little box. This is the tune I was playing in the intro, and then it's in there. So it's really that simple. You just take an MP3 and you drag and drop it into this little, oh shoot, I don't know if you guys can see where I'm pointing that. But you point it or place it into this little section here. It's really pretty intuitive. And Dead Flower Blues, if you end up getting that and need some help, I'd be happy to help you with that in any way I can. But you just drag and drop. Right on, everybody. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. I feel like this was really fun tonight, a fun topic. It's something I'm really passionate about because improvising is my favorite thing to do musically. I do enjoy playing a difficult passage and making it through that, but I love jamming. I really love jamming. And more than that, I love empowering people to feel like they can do it, and so it doesn't feel like this mystical thing. Like anybody can improvise. In fact, I'll leave you guys with this. Again, kind of like I was saying earlier, if you're beating yourself up, if you're feeling down on yourself about your improvising or anything like that, remind yourself of this. You are a masterful improviser. In fact, you've been improvising your whole existence. You improvised before you could speak. You were improvising on how to stand up and how to walk, and every conversation you've ever had has been improvised. You have to improvise at work, I'm sure. If you're driving in your car, sometimes the road is closed. You have to improvise and take a different route. I don't say these things just to be kind of cheeky and like, oh, I think it's significant. I think that we sometimes can forget how good we are at improvising. It's just that without some of that mapping of the terrain, that's where the bottlenecks happen. And sometimes it's just being able to see the options that are there. That was what I was hoping to get across with that worksheet. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys hanging with me. I hope you got something out of this tonight. Don't forget to get the worksheet. And there's still a couple more hours. If you sign up for a trial of my course, you get a free half-hour lesson with me. So if you want to hang and talk some stuff specifically to you, there's a few more hours to do that. I appreciate you guys. I'm looking forward to a little vamp talk next week, and enjoy the rest of this week, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.